Madera companies, welcome back to Touch Base. I'm Josh Haynes, the Director of Community Impact, and as you know, we've been kind of going through this conversation of emotional intelligence, and I am super excited today because we're going to get to have an interview. Brigitte Yeager is joining us. She is the Vice President of Legal Affairs for all of the Madera companies, and so thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining us. And I know that this is your first time on the podcast. And so give people a little bit of a bio, kind of how you got to the Madera companies. And I know you've worked in multiple roles for us. And then now, like I said, you take care of legal affairs. But how did you get here?
I actually started with Madera before they were Madera.
Okay.
I was working on a 415-unit property in Lubbock as a leasing agent. And at the time, I was 18 years old, so here I am giving my age away. But I was working as a leasing agent, and they took over that property. And so I worked on that property through college.
Okay.
And when I graduated from undergrad at Texas Tech, I became a property manager for them at Quail Creek Apartments in Lubbock, and worked there a couple of years before I decided I really wanted to go to law school.
Mm-hmm. So wait. Were you a property manager at age 22?
Yes.
That is impressive.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, that's way impressive. Either it's really impressive or really irresponsible of Madera to have put you over a property at 22.
I believe I was 22. I may have been a couple of years older than that because it took me 5 years to get through undergrad.
Okay. Yeah. Still, though, that's awesome.
So I went to my supervisor and said, hey, I'm going to go back to law school. And Madera blessed me by letting me be a marketing coordinator for several of our properties in Lubbock while I was in law school.
Wow.
So that paid my rent.
Yes.
While I went to law school. When I was in law school, my third year of law school, I had my first daughter, who is now 14. And when I was studying for the bar, I was pregnant with my son.
Okay.
They're 10 and a half months apart. And so that was quite the challenge because I had an 8-month-old at home and I was 8 months pregnant while I was studying for the bar.
That is a monumental accomplishment to have passed the bar and to have had children as young as you did. That's crazy.
So I tell my kids that my daughter graduated from law school because I was pregnant with her when I graduated, and my son passed the bar because I was pregnant with him when I took the bar exam.
That is awesome.
Yes.
And throughout that time, you were working with Madera.
I was,
wow.
Yes. I was still the marketing coordinator. So when I graduated from law school, I came back to Madera. Not came back, I was already with them, but I got an office at the corporate office.
Okay.
And started doing special projects, things like the website. Back then, we didn't have John McNally. It was me.
Yeah.
We were much smaller, and it was just me. And so I handled that. And then I got a job at Legal Aid Society, where I did divorces, but the majority of it was protective orders. I had an office at the Women's Protective Services.
Wow.
And at the Lubbock Rape Crisis Center.
I did not know that. Yeah.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes. So I did that for a couple of years and continued to do special projects for Madera. And then the special projects thing kind of gave out. It was over. And so Dave offered me a position as the director of HR.
Wow.
And as we started talking more, he said, you know what? I think you can be director of legal affairs as well. So I came back to the office again and started that role. And then when Rodney came on in 2020, they moved me to Vice President of Legal Affairs.
Wow, that is impressive. That is crazy.
Thank
and
you.
by Dave, you mean Dave Marcinkowski.
Yes.
Kind of brought you in to do that. Very cool.
Yes.
And I did not know that you were the director of HR there for a little while.
I was from 2017 to 2020.
Okay. Very cool. Very
Yes.
cool. So the first pillar, first kind of facet of how we do emotional intelligence is self-awareness. And that was something John McNally talked about in his podcast. And so now we move into this conversation of self-regulation. And so for you and how you do your job or manage relationships, what is self-regulation for you?
It's the ability to manage your emotions and behaviors in all settings, including difficult situations.
Yeah.
So for me, what comes to mind is calm, cool, and collected.
Yeah, I like the way that you said that, as far as the way that you manage those things, but the way that you kind of direct the behavior, because I think that's an important piece of it. It's not just like tamping down the feelings, it's directing it in hopefully positive ways, right? So that we can become not just better people, but so that we can advance whatever it is that is our values or the places that we integrate with people. So as you reflect upon like work history, right? Like you've talked about at 18 years of age being a leasing agent, to being a property manager, to doing marketing and HR, to now overseeing all of the legal affairs that we've got within our company. How important has experience been to you, like new life experiences and new education?
I think it's totally important. I mean, I have to stay up to date on my CLEs, which are continuing legal education. I take all the Grace Hill courses. Laws change, education changes, experience changes as you grow and mold yourself and take on the training that you need.
I want to come back to something that you said just a second ago, because you've said it a couple of times, and I've mentioned it even as we talk about emotional intelligence, and that is like this ability to like manage stress. And we know that unmanaged stress like can lead to destruction. It can lead to like hurtful things, whether it's relationally or even just physically and emotionally for ourselves. And so as we talk about navigating life with all of the stresses that kind of happen, how have you kind of learned to manage your own stress?
So you have to prioritize your task and also not overcommit yourself. So for me, I constantly find myself saying, slow down, take a deep breath, breathe. It reminds me that in most situations, I don't have to respond immediately. It's perfectly fine to take a deep breath and think about my response before I react.
Yeah. What advice then, because you talked about being a leasing agent, right? And these people on property who you've got residents who want an answer in the moment. So what does it look like to kind of take a breath and breathe and give yourself a minute for somebody like them who is, constantly being bombarded with needs of residents and how they interact with people? How do you navigate that, do you think, or what advice might you give them?
As a leasing agent, I would say you can still take a deep breath and gather your thoughts and figure out how you're going to make a decision that's going to properly impact the property.
You've mentioned being a mom and the ability or the desire to say no so that you're not overcommitting yourself or your family to different types of things, but then also just navigating the stresses of life, of being a parent. How do you kind of navigate those channels in order to be purposeful in your responses?
It's all about saying no.
Okay. Talk about that for a moment. How do you say no when your kids want to do things and what else?
Well, it's daily.
Yeah.
They want to do something they want. So they want something constantly. So I have to learn I'm not here to be their friend.
Right.
I'm here to be their mother.
Yeah.
And so I have to say no to things. And my son is very athletic. He's very involved in our small town athletic program. And then he also does AAU basketball outside of that.
Okay.
Which I said yes to. And I probably should have said no, because now we're committed to practices 3 times a week and games once a week and tournaments every weekend. But those are also things that I enjoy. So going to his games makes me super happy. It relieves my stress to be able to do that and kind of get out of the norm. Yeah.
I think you're hitting on something I think is important. So my kids are, they play club soccer. And so, yes, we do some traveling and my kids play. My daughter actually has a league where they play in Dallas. Okay. So we travel and do all sorts of crazy things for her. But I think you're hitting on something that's really important. And that is saying no and not overcommitting doesn't mean you do nothing. It just means you do the things that are beneficial and helpful and life-giving for your family and life-giving for you. And I think that's a great way to manage stress. Is it's not just sitting at home and doing nothing. It is, what are those life-giving things for you and for your family?
And I have to tell myself at the games, quit checking your email.
Yeah. No, talk about that for a minute. How do you, because it's important, right? Part of self-regulation is family time and work time. So how do you, that's one of those things. Talk about that for a minute.
That is one thing. And when you have a cell phone that's constantly attached to you, it's so easy to get wrapped up in it. And I have to teach myself, sit it down. This is time to spend time with your kids. And if
Yeah.
something really, really happens, they can contact me by phone or whatever without me having to check email or text messages constantly.
Which I think you're hitting on something that I think is important for people, and that is you've talked to us just a few moments ago about prioritizing your tasks. So when it's time to work, like work and work hard, and then when it's time to be, mom or wife, like you're talking about, it's be family driven and compartmentalize in good ways, and that helps manage stress for you, does it?
It does, absolutely.
Very cool. So let's come back to like your actually field that you do as far as what you do for the Madera companies with like legal affairs and things like that. I mean, you protect the companies, but you also in a lot of ways you protect our employees as far as how we navigate all of the different legal matters that we might run into. How do we make certain that as you are walking through those, whether it's cases or lawsuits that come out against us or whatever things we might go through, like how do you navigate self-regulation in what seems like pretty emotional situations?
It's about being confident and knowledgeable, and that the education and the training and that the experience that I have has put me where I need to be to handle whatever circumstance is thrown before me. It's also about having faith in God. That He won't put on more than me than I can handle. I've learned that being hasty, arrogant, or abrasive, it just isn't necessary most of the time. To achieve a successful result, it's much better to manage your emotions and think before you react.
So you said something I think is really important when you talk about how and you connected your education and some of your expertise to your confidence. How do those things, how has that education and the new things that you've learned, how has that given you confidence to enter into these seemingly emotional difficulties?
I'm kind of the poster child for Madera. I started as a leasing agent, and I've just worked my way up to where I am today, and that's all because of training and education and more experience and staying in the field. And Charlie and I, Charlie Young, we were in Florida together back in probably 2000, and he said to me, once you get this in your blood, it never comes out. And I thought, whatever, I'm out of here. I just got to get through law school and I'm done. But it was so true. It is all about that. So I would say to people, don't give up. Keep pursuing whatever you're doing. I mean, whatever role you're in, there's always going to be something else that you might want to do, even within our company, that can grow yourself.
So you're talking about growing here. As we grow, and as we like walk through different things, we constantly understand that life is like this difficult balance, because we do have emotions and those are okay, but directing them in those positive ways in which you're kind of talking about is important. It's also important to be able to like emotionally talk about who you are and to give your conviction and values and make decisions while not being bullied by the emotions of another person, right? So how do you navigate that where there's this like strength and confidence in your convictions and your values, but there's also the kindness and humility to deal with the person, and yet at the same time you're not kind of getting run over by them? How do you navigate that?
I follow policy. In 99% of situations, there is some sort of written or unwritten rule book that you can follow. And I stick by that. I try to make sure that the decisions that I make are based on a solid foundation that I can rely upon to make educational choices.
Yeah, that's huge, because I think we have how big is our associate policy again?
About 90 pages.
About 90.
And I happen to have written and edited that.
Yes. And I appreciate you for doing that, because I think that's important. But you said something huge, right? Like in the midst of these emotional things where you may have somebody on property, or you may have a customer or somebody who gets like worked up over something and is trying to like assert dominance over us. Like it is nice to be able to take a step back and go, this is the policy, and I can confidently give that to you for what our company is, but I can also do so in like respectful, kind way, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Now, in my field, it gets a little tricky.
Okay.
Because as attorneys, we interpret policy very differently.
Okay. Tell me about that a little bit. What does that look like?
Well, it's all about your opinion and how the policy is written. It's kind of like the Bible. Some people will interpret verses to mean something totally different than what other people will. So we kind of have a saying in law where you just try to get to maybe.
Okay.
If you can just get to maybe, then you're actually reaching some sort of an agreement.
Okay, I like that. That's pretty funny. So you've talked about kind of your life, right? I mean, you start here as a leasing agent at 18, and then you've kind of been in the Madera companies since, at least in one realm or another. I want to ask this question kind of at the end of every one of the episodes, right? And we talk through this. If you were to give like 25-year-old Brigitte some advice, or we've got so many employees who are in their 20s and their 30s who are growing through emotional intelligence and kind of coming into their own and figuring out not just our industry, but they're also, a lot of them are even figuring out who they are and how they fit in their environments. Like, what advice would you kind of pass along when it comes to self-regulation?
I would just say that it's not becoming of anyone to be reactive in a negative manner or impulsive. You can achieve a positive result without having to be disrespectful of others.
Sure.
Learn how to control your emotions. That's what I would tell myself when I was 18 years old. I mean, somebody would come in with a dirty Kleenex and drop it on my desk and say, "Look what your maintenance got left in my apartment." And I'm thinking, look what you just left on my desk. But you can't react like that. It's not only about what comes out of your mouth, but also your mannerisms and your body language. So I would just say, make sure the messages that you're sending are becoming of yourself and or the organization that you're representing.
Yeah, I've heard it said many times that the goal in self-regulation is to win the person, not the fight.
That's right.
Yeah, to really engage and win over whatever that person is wrestling with and going through, rather than like, hey, I could make you look stupid in the midst of this if I wanted to. I think that's really helpful for us to kind of wrestle with. You talk about learning to manage your emotions. Is it fair to say then, like, learning to do that is like a lifelong journey?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like that you brought up even just being able to talk through this lifelong journey of managing your emotions. And so I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for joining us. I know this is probably not the most fun thing you've ever participated in, but I appreciate you doing that, because I think you do with your wealth of experience with Madera, and then also with what you've done in growing even yourself as a person. I think you offer us some really good insights. So thank you so much for joining us on our podcast.
Sure.
Yeah. Madera Companies, we're going to have another episode for you next week. We want to thank you guys so much for having tuned in. And like I said, we'll have another one for you. You guys have a good rest of your day.